already on it. Because it's so exciting.
Okay. I think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, there it is.
I would like to call to order this evening's public hearing for the Tipton Community School Corporation. Tonight we'll be just discussing our budget and bus replacement and capital projects plan. And so with that, are you going to start or Brooke?
I'll just go ahead and start, and I will introduce Brooke Cleaver, who is going to do our presentation on the budget, and we'll just turn it over to her.
Thank you, Dr. Glaze. After I get through the information slides, would you click on the budget forms? I think they're on the last
Yes,
slide of this.
absolutely.
Those, thank you. So for our 2025 budget proposal, the next few slides we're going to go over, we'll talk about the budgeted funds, purposes, and revenue sources for each of those. The budget,
Let's get the mic a little closer to you, if you don't mind. Thank you.
better?
Yeah.
Okay. So the budget process is basically an 18-month snapshot that looks at the ending cash balance as of June 30th, 2024, and projects what we expect to bring in the way of revenue and what we expect to spend in the last 6 months of this year and all of calendar year 2025. Our impact on revenue slide, enrollment, we've estimated at 1,360, which equates to the 11,047,193 in the education fund. Assessed value impacts operations fund and taxes. The Indiana statewide average income, which we'll discuss here in a little bit, impacts the operations fund. Circuit breaker or property tax caps equates to a loss to the operations fund. The DLGF is estimating $600,000 for 2025, and then we have added grants for funding for staff, professional development, technology, and other instructional supports, investment, return on deposits. For the education fund, obviously that supports teacher salaries and benefits, principal office salaries and benefits, special programs like high ability, spec ed, summer school, career technical remediation. We pay our instructional aides, guidance, counseling, nurses, speech pathologists, classroom supplies and equipment, educational media services, and curricular material, athletics, academic sponsor stipends. Revenue sources, of course, are the state basic grant, which is equal statewide, but then it will vary by our figures for academic performance grant, special education, career technical, non-English speaking grant, local income tax. We also receive miscellaneous other revenues, reimbursements from summer school. Operations fund supports transportation, bus replacement, capital projects, payroll, insurance, custodial, maintenance, utilities. Revenue sources, commercial vehicle excise tax, financial institution tax, excise tax. Funds may be transferred from the education fund to the operations fund. The state permits up to 15% of all education revenues. Our max levy growth quotient, this was what I was talking about, how income impacts what we can bring in the operations fund, and that's a 6-year average of Indiana non-farm personal income, and that's calculated annually by the state budget agency, and we are capped for 2025 at the 4%. The DLGF expects we will have a property tax loss of $600,000. Currently for this year, it's $525,486. Debt service fund pays lease rentals, general obligation bonds, associated fees, similar revenues from CVET, license excise, FIT, with the balance funded by property taxes. This next slide is just a little historical data showing our total budget for 2025 for the three funds advertised at $21,145,802, and then a little bit of history there for you. And we have counts, employee numbers, looking at number certified, number classified staff through several years here. And if you'll go to the last slide, that's where the link is for our budget documents. First up will be where this all begins is with the current year financial statement. This form looks at our current year budget expenses, our remaining appropriation for the last 6 months of this year. If we expect to come in under on appropriation, the DLGF wants to know that because they assume we spend it all unless we tell them we could come in under. So, which means if we come in under, that's more money in our cash balance. It'll also look for the estimated property tax collections in the debt service fund and the operations fund. All of this information feeds into a later form called the 4B, which is where the tax rates are computed. The next form is Form 1, which is the budget estimate for the 3 funds.
Got it in March.
Debt service, $4,021,750. Education fund, if you scroll down, you'll see, is estimated to be $11,762,484. And lastly, operations, $5,361,568 for a total budget of $21,145,802. The next form is our Form 2 revenue estimates. This goes basically through the 3 funds. We project what we'll bring in for the last 6 months of this year, what we'll bring in for all of next year. One thing that will be different is the state is requiring at the beginning of January that we take our curricular material fund, which is 900 and 910 on your fund report that you see monthly. They're having us roll that into the education fund. So it's all going to be blended. So we've accounted for that roll in here, that one line that's 350 some thousand in the education fund. So it's the 900 and 910 fund is curricular material. And so they're going to have us roll those balances into the education fund beginning in January. So we'll be paying all the curricular material expenses out of there and not the 900 fund any longer. It will no longer exist. So we're blending it all together. Let's see. Notice to taxpayers Form 3. You'll see there that we have our advertised budget estimate and our expected levy. And then that column 5 just looks at our current levy for this year. And our adoption meeting date is set out there for October 8th at 6:30. And our estimated max levy for the operations on the left side is at $4,023,183, and the property tax cap loss of $600,000. That's auto-populated by the DLGF. The next form would be the budget estimate, Form 4B. This is where it all comes together. So first looking at, I believe, debt services first. The fund carries the operating balance that we've talked about. Then we tally what our expenses are going to be for the last part of this year, all of next year, what revenue we expect to come in, and then spread that across a reduced AV, which the DLGF still suggests we use that. Estimate high, use a lower AV so that our rate comes out a little higher. The form shows it'll be 0.5231. However, once the state works that against what's now showing as our AV for 2025, the rate could fall to 0.4181. The next page is education fund. Budget drafted $11,762,484. That draws in that Form 1 and then the revenues from Form 2. It accounts for transfers to operations. And then this fund does not draw property tax. So that's not applicable here. There's no assessed value to apply here. It's strictly financials. The next one is operations fund. Budget drafted at $5,361,568. Again, what we expect to pay out, receiving revenue, hoping to achieve the operating balance indicated. We used the reduced AV and the rate came out to 0.6392. And you'll see there on one of the lines that 600,000 loss, line 12, I believe, has that property tax cap loss. And then our levy is on line 11, $4,023,183 that you did see on the notice to taxpayers. I believe after they work our 2025 assessed value, that rate will drop to 0.5 or 0.6. So The Form 43 notice to taxpayers was the legal advertisement for publication, which we posted in Gateway on September 11th. That meets the 10 days posting requirement ahead of this public meeting. And then our adoption meeting is October 8th at 6:30. There's 10 days in between this meeting and that meeting to meet that requirement.
Okay. And I have a couple of things to share. Rob had some excellent questions that he sent regarding just our discussion about managing the debt. And so his question was in regard to the fact that we did issue debt before July 1st, 2023, and how it should be exempt from the 40-cent rule that it just kind of came rolling out from the legislature in the spring of last year. And so basically what we found out is, first, I asked the wrong question and to Jeff Quackenbush. And the wrong question was, okay, if we want to issue debt, what do we need to do? Instead of saying, what do we need to do? And then if we issue debt, what do we need to do? So basically what I have, and this is from Jeff, is essentially, no, we do not have to go through a petition remonstrance. If we do not choose to increase our debt or go into another bond issuance. So if we would decide to go into a bond issuance, we would have to get it below that 40 cents
Can you go back for a
range.
second?
Absolutely.
For the crowd and people who don't know,
Mhm.
can someone define that a little bit more clearly? Petition.
Certainly. Petition remonstrance is essentially what you're saying is, this is the rate, and then you have a public hearing. You actually have two public hearings within a period of time. Within those public hearings, you of course take public testimony. And then at that point, if someone disagrees with being over the 41 cents, then they can file a petition and then try to obtain signatures. And after, you have to get so many signatures from property owners in the district. And then it could, if they get enough signatures, then we would be in a situation where we could not have that tax rate of 41 cents. Now, that doesn't matter now because we've already issued the bonds. Okay.
That was my
And you're exactly right. And I'm glad you asked the question. And again, I asked the wrong one, so that one's on me.
no, that's fine. It was
yeah.
just
No, I'm
completely
glad you
different
did.
than what the internet, and of course the internet's always right.
I'm just glad you
Okay.
asked.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we decide that we do not want to issue a new debt in 25, then we just maintain the tax rate at the 41 cents. Nothing happens. Nothing changes. If we decide we want to issue new debt in 25, then we would have to use that 130,000 of cash balance to bring the rate down to 39 cents in order for us to issue new debt in 25.
So the way the lobbyist explained it to me, like back when we were all young and we were getting our first mortgages and you were allowed to prepay or buy down your note and get a better rate. Well, that's really not what was happening to you, but that was the idea. It's the same thing here. We can keep it right here, not do anything. But if we do decide to go forward and issue, then we have to prepay the 100 and some odd thousand bucks so we don't jump above our 41, right? So,
Right.
So it gives
right.
us gives us space.
yeah.
It does.
So
It does.
we're
Yeah.
just, yeah, so.
And then Baker Tilly will come in our work session in October and just kind of talk a little bit about this, and then also talk a little bit about the rate after 25, what that will look like. And that will be based, we've asked them to base that on a 0 AV increase. So this would be the, I guess, worst possible scenario, because there will likely be some kind of an AV increase. It won't be as much as it's been over the last 3 years, but there will be a little bit of one. So that just kind of would give you guys a little bit of an idea of what that might look like. So again, I'm really glad that Rob asked the question, and I'll make sure to share this with you guys.
Oh, okay.
So that you can take a look at it and have any questions that might come up. But again, that's just kind of where that is. So again, if we don't do anything, we anticipate our rate's going to be 41.81, okay, which will be fine since we've already issued debt. If we want to issue new debt, it'll have to be at 39 cents. So, okay. All right. Okay. And
Thank you for that.
well, thank you for
Yeah,
asking the question.
that's-
I greatly appreciate it, because again, this stuff just gets way too complicated, and I just appreciate you asking the question. I will go over very quickly the bus replacement plan for 25. We do not plan to purchase any buses in 25, but we are looking to replace 2 buses in 26. One would be kind of a regular typical bus that we call a C2, which has the nose on the front, and then we would also purchase a pusher, which is the flat-nosed type. So again, typically those flat-nosed type of buses we use for in-town routes, because there are routes that are really packed. And so there is a little bit of a price difference between the two. So we're estimating around $130,000, $150,000 for one of those, for each of those buses in 26. And then 27, we would look at replacing 2 pushers, which would be 150 each. And then 28 would be 2 of the C2s with the nose. And then looking out at 29, 2 pushers. Again, we try to replace pushers with pushers, unless we know that that bus is not, filled to capacity, then we may end up getting a C2. They are just a little bit cheaper. And honestly, right now, they're just much easier to get. So the pushers have been very delayed in production and everything like that. Like we mentioned before, the 3 buses will be covered by the GEO bond we issued last year. And then if we decide to buy that 4th bus, the second one in 27, then that would have to come out of operations. And again, this is kind of just a long-term plan. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to replace the buses, but the DLGF likes for us to project that out.
Do you know how many, the original Go bond, I think, was up to 12 buses. I think we ended up at around 7. How many buses have we purchased with the GEO bond?
Yeah, when we talked about it, we were going to replace 7 buses.
Okay.
And so we have replaced 4.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
So
We literally have 3 buses in this plan that are covered,
yes.
and then everything else is in the wild still. Okay,
Pretty much.
thank you.
Yes, yes. And I don't remember exactly how much that GEO bond was. Brooke probably has that figure in her head. There you go. Yeah. And then for capital projects, once again, this is kind of one of those plans that has just kind of been left over, even though we don't really have a capital projects fund anymore. So essentially we are just trying to project out some expenses that we might have, that again, we would have to have some operations dollars to fund. None of this is set in stone. It's just a little bit of a projection. And so nothing in there is too earth shattering. We obviously always have, parking lot repairs. We're always looking at roof projects. One of the things that's a little bit different for 25 is I would like to start repairing some fence, particularly out at our baseball field. And we also want to take a look at some of the electrical in the auditorium to make sure that everything is working appropriately there. So that's kind of the one thing that's just a little bit different compared to the normal everyday type of expenses. And then the final page, they kind of want for us to do a little bit of a projection on when something might start. Again, no one really knows, since it's projecting out for the next 3 years, when exactly that's going to happen, or if all these things will still be in need. So again, it's just a matter of projecting out, trying to make a plan for our operations dollars on how we can proceed to maintain the campus. Any questions on that? Did you have a bond number?
We brought in 1,487,772. Looks like we purchased an activity bus in July of 23.
Skid steer.
Bus with a lift in December of 23. Another 78 C2 in February. I can't tell the date on this one. Another 78 C2 and then another 78 passenger. And I didn't make a note on this last one for 135,000. And then we have a purchase order for, nope, no others, but just funds available for use for those 2 or 3 buses you mentioned.
When we approved this in October, we're approving the plan, not necessarily the spending of that.
Right, you're just
We would see that again.
And if you remember from last year, we're just approving this guesstimate.
Right.
We can, these projects can all go away, or they can go verbatim. It's just
Yep.
the,
Yep.
whatever, the earmarking of
Yeah.
the fund.
Yeah.
So
It's
I learned that last year.
there
So
you
that's
go. There you
just-
go.
I like to share.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's just kind of a big guess.
Yep.
I mean, really, for lack of a better way to say it.
Yeah.
So, okay,
Well,
that's it for
right.
me.
This time, do we have any comments from the community?
We had one, a newcomer, Laura Saton. Laura, thanks for joining us.
I just kind of wanted to make an observation. As someone who comes to these meetings faithfully and strives to understand and learn, and every year we have the strategic goal of engaging parents and improving communication and all of that, finding this information on our website was very hard. And a lot didn't come out till like last minute. I really liked how she presented the worksheets and all that, and I just feel if it's in the public meeting, I don't know why we can't have it on our website so that we can actually, if we're trying to give feedback about a budget, we can't like access that information to ask questions, which I know you won't, you can get back to at a later time, but it's just very hard in 3 minutes to comment and give feedback from the community if we don't have that information readily at our fingertips or see the drill down. Because yeah, like I said earlier this month, our enrollment is declining. Our birth rate is not just declining this year, but it's a steadily decrease, right? And, there's just a lot of questions. I appreciate the comment about evaluating administrative positions and things like that before you fill them. I think that's important. I also think it's important before we create administrative positions, we also kind of look at that need as well. I'm a huge involved parent, right? I get on every committee I possibly can, but I just would appreciate more as a community member and a parent of a student in this school that we have access to those kind of details, because getting up here and not knowing what I'm gonna say because I didn't see any of that information just makes it more challenging. And so that's what I have to add.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Any other comments, Rob?
Nope, that was it.
All right. With that in mind, I need a motion, and can we just adjourn it, or do we need a motion? Okay, I need a motion and a second to adjourn our public hearing. Yeah. All those in favor of adjourning our meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you so much for attending.
Thank you.
No, they got to adjourn the meeting at our delegates with a gavel, and I tried to call them.
Do you need a gavel?
I would,
When we left,
I would encourage you to talk to our state representatives, so our legislators, because what I've learned in the last 2 years is there have been